Snow fell quietly outside, soft flakes drifting past the window and settling on the silent street. Inside the living room, the glow of the Christmas tree filled the small house with a warm light. Margaret sat in her armchair, her eyes fixed on the empty chair across from her. That chair once belonged to her husband, Daniel. Every Christmas morning, he would sit there with his coffee, teasing her about the decorations or laughing at their son Ethan as he tore through wrapping paper. But now, for the second year in a row, the chair stood empty. A sharp reminder that he was gone. Margaret pressed her hands together, trying to stop them from trembling. She had promised herself that this Christmas would be brighter than the last one. Last year, she and Ethan had gone through the motions decorating, cooking, pretending to celebrate, but it had all felt hollow. Ethan had only been 11 then, but grief had made him look older. She had seen it in the way he avoided the tree, in the way his laughter never reached his eyes. He had grown too quiet for a boy his age. And Margaret feared the loss had stolen the joy of his childhood. Now, at 12, he was still carrying that shadow. She worried constantly about him. He was a good boy, gentle, thoughtful, and bright, but too often she found him staring out the window as if waiting for someone who would never come home. Margaret wanted to change that. She wanted to give him a Christmas morning that would remind him of joy, of family, of love. She had bought gifts, baked cookies, and hung every ornament she could find in the old boxes. She had even strung up the lights Daniel used to untangle every year, muttering under his breath but smiling all the same. Still, the silence was heavy. She walked around the tree, straightening an ornament shaped like a silver star. Her fingers brushed against the branches, and then she paused. Something was tucked deep beneath the garland, almost hidden between the pine needles. She frowned and leaned closer. It wasn't one of her decorations. Carefully, she pulled out a folded envelope. The paper yellowed slightly at the edges. Her heart skipped as soon as she saw the handwriting on the front. Her breath caught in her chest. The slanted letters, neat but familiar, were Daniel's. She would have known that handwriting anywhere. Margaret sank into the chair, staring at the envelope as if it might vanish. How could this be? She hadn't seen it before, not last year, not the year before that. Had it really been sitting there all along, waiting for her to find it? Her fingers trembled as she slid the paper open. For a moment, she couldn't bring herself to read it. The sight of Daniel's handwriting already brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't seen it in so long, and now it felt like he was reaching out through time, through memory. Finally, she unfolded the paper and read. "Maggie, if you're reading this, means I couldn't be there with you and Ethan. Please don't let the season pass in sorrow. Give him my gift. It's hidden where we once shared our quiet Christmas mornings. He needs to know my love didn't end. It never will." Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth. Her tears fell silently, dropping onto the page. She read the words again, unable to believe them. Daniel had written this before he was gone, before illness had taken him. He had thought ahead, knowing she and Ethan would need comfort. He had hidden something for Ethan, a gift, somewhere tied to their memories. Her mind raced. Where we once shared our quiet Christmas mornings. She thought of their traditions, of the small porch outside where they used to sit together, sipping coffee while Ethan played in the snow. It had always been their private ritual, their moment of peace before the day began. Was that where Daniel meant? Was the gift there, waiting after all this time? She closed her eyes, holding the letter against her chest. Part of her wanted to run outside that very moment to dig through the snow and find whatever Daniel had left behind. But she hesitated. Ethan was asleep in the next room, curled under the blanket, waiting for morning. She knew she had to wait too. Margaret glanced again at the empty chair across from her. For the first time, she didn't see only emptiness. She saw hope. Something had shifted. Daniel's presence lingered not just in memory, but in action. He had left something for their son, a piece of himself carried forward. Tomorrow morning, she would discover what it was. Tomorrow, Ethan would open a gift not from the past, but from his father's love, and for the first time in years. Margaret allowed herself to believe that maybe Christmas could be more than sorrow. Maybe it could bring them light again. Margaret sat at the edge of her bed long after midnight, the letter still in her hands. She read it over and over, every word pulling her deeper into memory. Daniel's handwriting was so clear, so alive. It was as if he had only stepped out for a moment and would walk back in with that easy smile of his. But he wouldn't. That truth stung. Yet the letter was proof he had thought of her and Ethan until the very end. He hadn't left them empty, he had left them a thread to follow. Her mind wouldn't rest. Give him my gift. It's hidden where we once shared our quiet Christmas mornings. Those words echoed again and again. She pictured the porch, the bench, the early mornings when she and Daniel would sit close together, coffee mugs warming their hands, listening to the faint sound of their boy's laughter as he played in the snow. It had been their private place, simple but full of love. Could it really be there? Could something have survived all this time, waiting for Ethan? Margaret wiped her eyes and stood, pacing the small room. Part of her wanted to go outside that very moment, dig through the snow, and find the hidden gift. But another part held her back. It didn't feel right to do it without Ethan. It was meant for him, after all, and tomorrow morning was Christmas. Daniel must have planned it this way, one final surprise to remind their son that love never fades. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. Then slipped it under her pillow. Her heart was racing, her thoughts spinning, but she forced herself to lie down. Across the hall, she could hear Ethan's soft breathing. He had fallen asleep clutching the blanket their grandmother had knitted years ago, his hair sticking out in messy tufts. He looked so young, yet the grief in his eyes during the past year had aged him. Margaret whispered a promise into the dark. Tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow you'll smile again. Morning came slowly, the soft glow of dawn seeping through the curtains. Margaret rose before Ethan stirred. She reached for the letter one more time, tracing Daniel's handwriting with her fingers, then slipped it into her pocket. Wrapping a scarf around her neck, she stepped quietly outside. The porch creaked under her weight, the boards old and familiar. Snow covered everything in a white blanket, still untouched. Her breath clouded in the air as she walked to the bench. She brushed her gloved hand across the wooden seat, sweeping away the snow. Her heart leaped as she saw something hidden in the corner beneath the slats. A small box wrapped in faded red paper rested there as if it had been waiting patiently all this time. Margaret's hands shook as she picked it up. The paper was worn, the corners softened by years, but it was whole. And there on a little tag was Daniel's handwriting again. For Ethan. Open with love. Her throat tightened. She pressed the box to her chest, tears springing to her eyes. For a moment she stood frozen in the cold, snowflakes clinging to her hair, unable to believe what she held. Daniel had planned this. He had known they would need hope, and somehow he had left this gift as his final act of love. Inside the house, she placed the box gently beneath the tree. She stepped back staring at it, her chest heaving with emotions she couldn't name. Relief, sorrow, hope, they all blended together. She thought of Ethan's face when he saw it, when he realized it was from his father. That thought alone nearly broke her. Just then she heard soft footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. His hair stuck out in every direction, and his pajamas hung loose on his growing frame. He looked at her sleepily, then at the glowing tree. His gaze landed on the small box beneath it. "What's that?" he asked, his voice still heavy with sleep. Margaret turned to him slowly, her eyes shining. "It's from your dad," she said quietly. Ethan froze, his eyes wide. From Dad. He stepped closer, staring at the little package as if afraid it might vanish. His lips parted, but no sound came. He looked at her, searching for an answer as though trying to believe something impossible. Margaret nodded, her throat tight. She knelt down so her eyes were level with his. "Your father left it for you. He wanted you to know that he never stopped loving you. He wanted you to remember him with joy, not sorrow." Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the box. He lifted it carefully, holding it as though it were the most fragile thing in the world. His face lit up with a mix of awe and disbelief. Margaret watched him, her heart pounding. This was the moment. This was the bridge between past and future. She prayed it would be enough to heal the cracks in his young heart. Ethan looked down at the gift, then back at her. "Can I open it now?" he whispered. Margaret swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, your dad wanted you to open it with love." Ethan sat cross-legged on the rug in front of the tree. He placed the box in his lap and began peeling the paper slowly, carefully, as though trying to make the moment last. "Ah!" Margaret sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. She could feel his heartbeat racing under her touch. The paper tore gently, falling away in pieces. Beneath it was a small wooden box. Ethan lifted the lid, and inside lay a hand-carved wooden train. It was simple but beautiful, polished smooth, with tiny wheels that actually turned. On the side were two small initials carved carefully, E. D. Ethan's lips trembled. "E.D.," he whispered. "Ethan and Dad." His voice broke and his eyes filled with tears. He held the train to his chest, hugging it tightly. Margaret felt her own tears streaming. But through them, she saw it her son's first true smile in years. It wasn't small or hesitant, it was wide, bright, and filled with a joy she thought she'd never see again. Her breath caught at the sight. Because that smile was Daniel's smile too, passed down through blood and memory. And in that moment, Margaret knew their Christmas morning was about to change forever. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. Ethan sat on the rug, the little wooden train in his hands, his fingers tracing the smooth edges as though afraid to let it go. Margaret watched him carefully, her chest tight. She had prayed for this moment, for something to break through the wall of grief that had weighed on her son since Daniel's passing. And now, here it was, his eyes shone. His lips curved into a smile she thought she'd never see again. Ethan lifted the train closer to the light. The carving was rough in some places, smooth in others, the kind of craft made by hands not perfect but full of love. He saw the small initials carved into the side D. Dion whispered them under his breath. "Ethan and Dad." The words trembled in the air, and then his grip on the toy tightened as if it was a lifeline. Margaret knelt beside him, her hand brushing gently against his back. "Your father wanted you to have it," she said softly. "He wanted you to remember he never forgot you. Even when he knew his time was short, he thought about you every moment." Ethan's head bent, his hair falling into his eyes. His voice cracked, and he shook his head. "I thought he left me." The words pierced Margaret like a knife. She drew in a sharp breath and hugged him close, her tears falling freely now. "Oh, sweetheart, he never left you. Not for 1 second. His love is still here. It's in me. It's in this home. It's in you." Ethan clung to her, the train pressed between them. For a long moment, mother and son simply held on to each other, breathing in the weight of love and loss all at once. Outside, snow drifted against the windows, muffling the world in silence, as if time itself had paused to give them this fragile peace. When Ethan finally pulled back, his face was wet with tears. But there was a light in his eyes Margaret hadn't seen since Daniel was alive. He looked at the toy again and whispered, "Do you think he made this just for me?" Margaret smiled through her tears. "I know he did. Every carving, every marquette's all his way of saying you were his greatest joy." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard, then looked at her with sudden seriousness. "Then I'll never let it go." He placed the train carefully on the table as though it were the most valuable treasure in the world. Margaret reached for the letter she had kept in her pocket. She pulled it out and handed it to him. "There's more," she said gently. "This was with the gift." Ethan unfolded the paper, his small fingers shaky as he read his father's handwriting. His lips moved silently over the words, "Give him my gift. It's hidden where we once shared our quiet Christmas mornings. He needs to know my love didn't end. It never will." Ethan's shoulders shook. He pressed the letter to his chest and whispered, "He really thought of me. He wanted me to know." Margaret wrapped her arms around him again, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. She could feel his tears soak into her sweater, but she didn't mind. They were tears of release, tears of a child who finally understood he hadn't been abandoned. Minutes passed before Ethan lifted his head. His cheeks were red, his eyes puffy, but his smile was still there, small but real. "Mom," he said softly, "do you think Dad can see us now?" Margaret hesitated, then touched his cheek with a trembling hand. "I believe he can. And I believe he's proud of you more than words can say." Ethan nodded, his little chest rising and falling quickly. "Then I'll make him proud. I'll take care of you, Mom, just like he wanted." Margaret's breath caught. Hearing those words from her 12-year-old son was almost too much. She hugged him tightly again, whispering, "You already make me proud every single day." The room felt warmer now, as if the glow from the tree lights had spread into every corner of their home. The emptiness of the past 2 Christmases didn't vanish, but it no longer felt unbearable. Daniel's absence was still there, yet his presence through the gift, the letter. The memory was stronger. Ethan picked up the train once more, rolling the little wheels back and forth on the rug. He laughed softly, the sound carrying a weight of relief. It wasn't loud or carefree like before, but it was laughter all the same, and Margaret savored it. She hadn't realized until that moment how deeply she had missed the sound of her son's joy. She sat back, wiping her tears, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daniel." In that instant, Margaret understood what her husband had wanted all along. The gift wasn't just for Ethan, it was for her too. It was proof that love doesn't end when life does. It carries on, binding hearts together across years, across silence, across grief. Ethan leaned against her shoulder, the train still clutched in his hand. He sighed deeply, almost peacefully. "Mom," he murmured, "I think this is the best Christmas we've ever had." Margaret kissed the top of his head and closed her eyes. She didn't answer because her throat was too tight, but in her heart she agreed. For the first time since Daniel's passing, Christmas morning didn't feel empty. It felt alive. And as she held her son close, Margaret realized that the true gift Daniel had left them wasn't wood or letters, it was the strength to keep loving, to keep living, and to find light even in the darkest winters. The room glowed with the soft light of the Christmas tree. The wooden train sat safely in Ethan's hands, and his small smile lingered, fragile but real. Margaret watched him, her chest tight with emotion. She had prayed for this moment, for some spark to bring her son back from the shadow of grief, and now, on this Christmas morning, it was finally here. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes wet but shining. His voice was a whisper, but it cut through the silence. "Mom, I thought Dad forgot about me." But he didn't. He never will. Margaret's breath caught. She bent down and wrapped her arms around him, holding him as if he were still her little boy who used to climb into bed on Christmas morning before the presents were opened. His small frame trembled against her, and she pressed her cheek to his hair, letting her tears fall freely. "You were always his world," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He loved you with everything he had. And even now, that love hasn't gone anywhere. It's right here." She pressed her hand gently over Ethan's chest. "It's in you." Ethan nodded, hugging the toy tighter. For a long moment they stayed like that, mother and son, clinging to each other in the quiet room. With the snow falling silently outside, it was as though the house itself had paused to give them this moment of healing. Finally, Ethan pulled back. His eyes were red, his cheeks streaked with tears, but there was a new strength in his expression. He took a deep breath, looked at the wooden train, and then looked at her again. "Mom," he said slowly, almost as though he was afraid of his own words, "I think Dad wanted you to smile again, too." Margaret froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. Ethan had always been sensitive, wise beyond his years. But hearing him say that was like having Daniel speak through him. Ethan continued, his small hands turning the toy carefully. "He left this for me, but maybe he wanted you to have something too. Not a gift, but a reason. Maybe he wanted us to start making new Christmas memories together, not just miss the old ones." Margaret felt her throat tighten. Her son's voice was steady, but his words carried so much weight. She reached up and brushed his hair back from his forehead. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Ethan said firmly. "Dad wouldn't want us to be sad forever. He'd want us to laugh again. To have a Christmas where you smile too." He glanced at her, hesitant but hopeful. "Do you think we could try?" Margaret pressed her trembling hand against her mouth. All this time she had been trying to protect Ethan, to shield him from the pain. But she hadn't realized that he had been carrying her sadness too. He had been waiting for her to find hope again, just as much as she had been waiting for him. She wiped her tears quickly, not to hide them, but to show him her answer. She smiled. It was shaky at first, but then it grew warmer, deeper, more certain. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered. "We can try. We'll make new memories. We'll carry Dad's love with us, but we'll keep living too. Together." Ethan's face lit up. His small smile broke into a grin, the kind of pure, joyful grin that only children can truly give. It was the smile she thought she'd lost forever, and now it was here again, shining like the sun breaking through clouds. That smile brought her to tears all over again. But this time they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of release, of relief, of hope. She laughed softly through them, shaking her head. "Look at you," she said. "You've given me the best Christmas gift I could ever ask for." "What's that?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide. "Your smile," Margaret whispered. "It's all I needed." Ethan leaned against her, the wooden train clutched in one hand. They sat together on the rug, the glow of the tree wrapping them in gentle light. The emptiness in the room hadn't vanished completely. Daniel's absence was still felt, but the weight of it was different now. It no longer crushed them. Instead, it reminded them of love, of what had been, okay, and of what still could be. Margaret looked at the empty chair across from hers. For the first time in 2 years, it didn't feel like a symbol of loss. Instead, it felt like a reminder of presence, silent witness to the bond Daniel had left behind. She smiled softly at it, as if he were sitting there again, proud of his wife and son. Ethan lifted his head suddenly. "Mom," he said, excitement flickering in his eyes, "can we go outside and build a snowman? Dad used to help me with that. We can make one for him." Margaret's heart swelled. She nodded quickly, standing and holding out her hand. "Yes, let's do it." He'd love that. Minutes later, they bundled into coats and scarves, stepping into the crisp morning air. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they rolled giant balls of snow across the yard, laughing when one toppled over and had to be remade. Ethan's laughter rang out clear and bright, echoing against the houses on the quiet street. Margaret laughed with him, breathless, her cheeks red from cold and joy. They built the snowman together, stacking each piece with care. Ethan stuck a scarf around its neck and placed a small stick in its hand, pretending it was holding the little wooden train. "This one's for you, Dad," he whispered, smiling. Margaret stood back, tears in her eyes again. But this time they were tears she welcomed. The snowman wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. It was a new memory, a symbol of love carried forward. As they walked back inside, stamping snow from their boots, Margaret looked at Ethan's face. His grin hadn't faded. She realized something in that moment. Their lives would never be the same as before. But they could still be full of joy, full of love, full of moments worth remembering. That Christmas morning had begun with sorrow, with an empty chair and a heavy heart. But it ended with hope, with a sun's smile that healed wounds deeper than words could reach. Margaret held on to that smile, knowing it was proof that love could survive anything. Inside, she placed the wooden train on the mantel, where it caught the light of the tree. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Merry Christmas, Daniel. We're okay. We're going to be okay." Ethan leaned against her side, still smiling, and together they watched the snow fall outside. The morning stretched before them, not empty, but full of promise. And in her son's smile, Margaret saw everything Daniel had wanted them to have: love, hope, and the courage to begin again.